morning or good afternoon. I want to face this way today because it's beautiful outside and I'm tired of looking at that screen. So I hope everyone's doing great. I wanted to just talk briefly about the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. I had some discussions last week with a couple of people regarding the process and what it's going to look like. And since it's so new and it hasn't even launched yet, I figured now's a good time to at least go ahead and get the groundwork set for you all about how it's gonna work, who's gonna be eligible, what we know so far, and then obviously I will update as I know more myself. So I'm gonna try my best, just my interpretation of what I've read, and then as things are opening up, as they open up the application process, then we'll obviously dive into more detail as those details are released. Okay. So this plan, this fund, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, is part of the American Rescue Plan. The fund itself is a $28.6 billion fund that was obviously established for the simple fact of trying to help keep restaurants open, revive the industry, and the SBA has promised that through this, they are going to administer the funds first and have priority given to the hardest hit and smaller restaurants and bars. So fingers crossed that actually happens and that these small businesses in our communities and towns get the relief that they need. The SBA also claimed that they have had tremendous focus on the application process being free of burdensome and bureaucratic hurdles, they said. I chuckle inside at that because we've all seen it firsthand. A lot of people have felt like it wasn't fair. The PPP process, for example, is one that I'm really speaking of. And it felt like some people got preferential treatment. And they're claiming here with this one that the focus is going to be on the restaurants and businesses that specifically are 51% or more owned by women, veterans, and those who are socially and economically disadvantaged. So again, let's hope that and pray that that's how this works. So they haven't released an official date yet as to when you can start applying, but they did say that there will be a 7-day pilot program first before it's open to the public. And during that 7 days, they're going to, first of all, randomly select businesses that are eligible. They're going to base this off of PPP loan data that they already have. And then those people will not get their funds before anyone else, but they'll be able to apply before everyone else because they essentially want to test the application process from a technical standpoint to make sure it's all smooth sailing before they release it to the public. The first 21 days, once it's open to the public, will be specifically for those priority members that I just spoke about, women, veterans, and those who are socially and economically disadvantaged. After the 21 days, it will be open to the public and will stay open until the funds are exhausted. The program was established to provide the funding to help restaurants keep their doors open. It's going to provide restaurants with funding equal to their pandemic-related revenue loss, up to $10 million per business and no more than $5 million per physical location. So without even knowing the calculation that they've provided, it's obvious this is strictly going to be you have to be showing a loss from 2019 to 2020 gross receipts. Also important to note, you will not have to repay these funds as long as they're used for purposes included in the guidelines and as long as they're used before March 11th, 2023, then you don't have to repay the funds. So who can apply? Obviously restaurants. That's what this whole thing is about. But then it also includes food trucks, food stands, food kiosks, snack bars, caterers, bars, bakeries, breweries, wineries, tap rooms, and even inns. But what's interesting to note is if you are a bakery, a brewery, a distillery, a winery, or an inn, you have to also show that at least 33% of your gross receipts in total came from on-site sales. So they're obviously trying to help people who are seeing a huge decrease in their gross receipts because people aren't coming inside. So you want to make sure that these are on-site sales. How do you apply? Well, we don't really know yet because the application process has not started yet, but there is a sample application on the SBA's website. I recommend you go check it out. It's on if you go to sba.gov and search in the search engine, Restaurant Revitalization Fund, the overview page will come up and it's one of the first little categories on how to apply. You can't submit that application yet. It's just a sample form, but it'll give you an idea of what you're going to expect. In addition to submitting the application, you're also going to have to provide some documentation, as we've all seen before. The good news is most of this you probably already have readily available because you've used it in the PPP process or in the forgiveness process or for your tax return. The first is the IRS Form 4506-T, which should suffice for the verification of tax information. Your gross receipts documentation will need to be proven and supported. That can be done via business tax returns, the IRS Form 1040 Schedule C, or the IRS Form 1040 Schedule F. For partnerships, you're going to need the IRS Form 1065, including the K-1s. Obviously, copies of bank statements are good to have. I would go back as far as 2019 because that's what we're comparing things to in our calculation. You'll also need externally or internally prepared financial statements, specifically the P&L, because we are looking at gross receipts. And then, as I mentioned, the specific businesses that need to prove that they have 33% of sales on site, you also need to supply evidence showing that you are in fact getting 33% of your revenue, gross receipts on site. If your business has not been open for since 2019, let's say it opened in 2020, then they're saying that you can, as long as your original business model contemplated for at least 33% of gross receipts in on-site sales, then you're fine, you can use it. That sounds crazy to me. I have no idea how they're going to certify that kind of stuff. I see a lot of red flags immediately, but that's just my interpretation of what I've read. Maybe they'll give you more guidance moving forward. Maybe that's just simply to help more people. Hopefully that's the case. I just hope people don't take advantage of the system. Okay, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but just to make myself clear, the application process has not opened. What we do know is when it does open, that there will be the first 21 days will be given to priority members for women, businesses that are 51% or more owned by women, veterans, or socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. You will be self-certifying that you fall into one of those categories. As of April 17th, which is when that article was released, the SBA said that they have set aside $5 billion for applicants with 2019 gross receipts of not more than $500,000. An additional $4 billion is set aside for businesses with gross receipts in 2019 of $501,000 to $1.5 million in gross receipts. And an additional $500 million is set aside for applicants with 2019 gross receipts of not more than $50,000. How will you determine the funding amount that you will be eligible to receive? They have given us 3 calculations so far. For those applicants that have been in operation since on or before January 1st, 2019, it's a very simple calculation. You're just going to take your 2019 gross receipts, subtract your 2020 gross receipts, and then take out also your PPP loan funds, because as we stated in the beginning, those are not included. Calculation number 2, geared towards the people who maybe opened during some point of 2019. You're going to take a monthly average of your gross receipts for 2019. So let's say you were open for 3 months. Take your average of those 3 months. That's going to be your new total. Multiply that by 12. Then you're going to subtract from that number your 2020 gross receipts and your PPP loan amounts. Calculation number 3. Another way to include even more businesses, if you began operations on or between January 1, 2020 and March 10th, 2021, you can fall into this calculation. Or even if you haven't even opened yet, but you've incurred expenses, you can also fall into this calculation. You would simply take the amount spent on eligible expenses between February 15th, 2020 and March 11th, 2021, subtract from that number the gross receipts of 2020, and don't forget to subtract your PPP loan funds, and there you go. If you weren't open for all of 2019, you actually are given the option. You can take calculation 2 or 3 and use that. So obviously I would recommend you run the numbers for both and see which one benefits you more, since they've given you that option. There will be a minimum award of $1,000, but they are going to provide funding up to $5 million per location, not to exceed $10 million per business or any affiliated business with the applicant. For purposes of this program, gross receipts, let's define what it is not. It is not amounts that you've received from the PPP loan, either draw 1 or 2. It is not amounts that you've received for the EIDL or advances you've received from the EIDL. It is also not state and local grants, even if they're not CARES Act related. It cannot be any state and local grants included in your gross receipts, as well as SBA Section 1112 payments. I feel like the use of funds that they've provided us with of allowable expenses is actually pretty broad, and it encompasses a lot. So I feel like it'll be beneficial for a lot of people, which is nice. It says that you can use them for payroll costs, including sick leave, payments on mortgages, business mortgages, business rent payments, but not prepaid rent, business debt services, including interest and principal, but again, you cannot prepay interest or principal. It also includes utility payments, maintenance expenses, construction of outdoor seating